discussion on the SomaVeda Noble Eightfold Path on page 1 in Lines of Wheels. Number 7, Vipassana, which I mentioned originated with the Thai monks. We actually know approximately the place where this meditation form was developed and who the monks were who really first codified it, okay? Where it was first widely taught and practiced in Thailand is in a place called Sukhothai. And if you ever get a chance to go visit Sukhothai, it is one of the most amazing places on the whole planet. It really is. As a PowerPoint, if you want to talk about planetary vortex points and places that are significant, Sukhothai is one of those places. Sukhothai is very interesting because it's been extensively researched by anthropologists with many excavations over a period of about 50 years. And what's interesting about it is when you find the ruins of the old temples, and there's many hundreds of them around the Sukhothai area, aside from the primary area, which is called the Grand Palace, you find that if you excavate, like dig down like 10 feet, you find remnants of older temples. And if you dig down another 20 feet, you find remnants of another set of structures and temples. And in fact, you can dig down like 30 feet and still find that their temples were built on top of temples, which were built on top of temples over a period of thousands of years. And so, and with many years between them. So you'll have a period of time where, 4,000 years ago, where there was some kind of monastic and spiritual life being practiced. And then there's a period of several hundred, 500, or 1,000 years where no one was there. And then another group comes along and just so happens builds the next set of temples right smack on top of the other ones. And then a great period of time passes, and then another culture comes, and they're like looking around like, where is the best place that we could build a sacred site? I think here, and the river's here, and the mountains there, and right here, and then bam, smack right on top of that one, they build another one, like a Neapolitan, a parfait of sacred sites built on top of sacred sites, built on sacred sites. Sukhothai is interesting because we use today things called ceramics, pots and pans and different things that are made out of ceramics. The oldest known intact kilns on the planet are in Sukhothai, Thailand. The oldest known intact. They actually believe that the Chinese brought the technology of porcelain and of terracotta, etc., from what the Thais call celadon, which is glazed terracotta and porcelain, from Sukhothai. And there's actually a museum now that's been excavated about 30 feet, a little over 30 feet, straight down. And there are kilns that were built on top of each other over a period of 10,000 years. Kilns. And they're virtually the same identical style. And if you built a traditional kiln in that style today, it would essentially, 90% would look exactly like the kilns that were built there centuries and centuries and centuries ago. And there's millions of pieces of pottery have been collected from there. And Sukhothai as a city was the first city that we know of in the world that had indoor running water and indoor plumbing, indoor bathrooms, flushing toilets. And Sukhothai in the 11th century had baths and had running water and indoor plumbing when the European cultures were still walking in their poo, where the Europeans were still thought that sanitation was that if you were discreet, you would either poo outside the house or you would dump it out the window when you were done. And this is literally 1,000 years before the Europeans discovered that you shouldn't live in your poop. Okay? So it was a very health conscious society. That's the only reason why they would have done that. And they say they inherited that technology from the ancient Rishi. Okay? And when we talk about meditation in general, we say there are three kinds of meditations: walking, sitting, and sharing nuat. In other words, traditionally speaking, the actual practice of doing sessions on people is a form of meditation that's been practiced. There are meditative benefits that you get from doing flowing sessions and other sessions on people that you do not get from any other kind of meditation. Sitting meditation is calm, it's object focused, it is introspective, and it is passive. Vipassana is active, it's dynamic, it's extroverted in that it's almost always done with people, with other people, in the company of other people, and you walk with them. So you have to be mindful of who's in front of you, and who's in back of you, and who's to the left of you, and who's to the right of you, and who's moving too fast, and who's moving too slow, and what is the cadence of the mantra, or what is the cadence of the meditation. So you're beating and banging around other people while you're trying to meditate, to find the space, the tempo that's just right. And then that's one level of insight meditation. And that's considered fairly advanced as a form of meditation. Now, when you talk about meditating on the body of another person, okay, start talking about meditation on the body of another person, that is a whole different ballgame. Whole different thing, okay? Because now not only are you dealing more personally with the person and their resistance and their openness and their access and their mobility or lack of motion and so on, but you also have to deal with yours. You got to deal with your restrictions on motion. You got to deal with the pain in your body. You got to work not only with their issues, but you have to work with your issues at the same time. Is a very fine and a very sophisticated idea of meditation. Is this idea of laying hands on another person and taking them through a sequence of vinyasa, flow, as a form of meditation. And we call it a dancing meditation because it's not linear. It's not just walking, okay? In other words, use every part of your body and you move in every direction, and you go up and you go down and you go out and you come back and you bring in and you push out, you project and you call forth. Use all of your faculties of mind, body, and spirit. So it is actually an advanced form of meditation. And it is in the Vipassana tradition, the idea that by emphasizing the between space, the meditative space between one technique and another, you are looking at the between space for your answers. My first Vipassana teacher was a Thai monk. His name was Ajahn Chah. And Ajahn Chah used to use this little description, which you've probably heard. It's common. It's now been shared by many, many people. And Thich Nhat Hanh, who I had mentioned previously, also studied with Ajahn Chah's tradition, okay? So he might have used some similar kinds of metaphors. But Ajahn Chah said it was like this, that the way the mind works is like you're outside and you're looking at the sky. You look up at the sky and you see stuff in the sky. And we call that stuff in the sky weather or clouds or storms or what have you. But let's say clouds. And some days you go outside and you might look up like today and all you see is clouds. You can't see anything else but clouds. And if you just look for a moment, you might not realize that the clouds are moving, that the clouds are in motion. And if I look at the sky right this minute, and if I look again at the sky 10 minutes from now, even though it might look the same, it's not the same sky. Why? The clouds are in motion. The clouds I see now actually are not the same clouds that were there a few minutes ago. The clouds that were there a few minutes ago have gone wherever clouds go. And then on some days you look up and you see clouds, and between the clouds you see something else. You see what Ajahn Chah called the clear blue sky behind the clouds. And he said that is actually the sky. The stuff between the clouds, the stuff that the clouds are in, is actually the sky. The clouds are not the sky. The clouds are something temporary. The clouds are something transitory that are moving across the landscape of the sky. And so is our head. Ideas and thoughts and feelings are clouds. And they're impermanent, and they're temporary, and they're transitional, and they're associative, and they're subject to change at any time. It is their nature to move. It is their nature to change always and at all times, and that never is not the case. But that is not your mind. Your mind is the clear blue sky. Your mind is the template or the tableau, the between space. Whatever is between the thought A and thought B. Picture A and picture C. Emotion A and emotion B. That whatever is not those things, that's what your mind is. And so the function of Vipassana is to give you a way to practice looking at the between places and not be overly considerate of that which is obscuring your vision of that which never changes. See, from our point of view, the sky above the clouds is eternal and never changes. Never changes. Even though we have the big movers, right? Like the moon and the planets and the sun. But for the purposes of the metaphor, the life of the planets and the life of the stars is pretty much immortal compared to our consideration of them. And the same thing is inside of our head. We actually have something inside of us that is more like that sky than it is like the clouds. And so we want to find ways to be able to see that and then to move into it. And if we can find ways to move into that space, then we're actually beginning to be more considerate of a consciousness which is not temporary, which is not transitory, which is not in motion, which is not subject to any random influence, which is in fact completely outside of the normal limitations of time and space. And that is what Vipassana is to bring us. We say, find your real abiding mind in thought, action, and deed. Number 8 is Pramivihansi. Pramivihansi is a Pali term. Actually, it's Thai, Pramivihansi. It means the 4 divine states of mind. Another way to say the 4 divine states of mind are the 4 boundless, the 4 unlimited, the 4 infinite states of mind. And they're love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. That's 4, okay? Love is the first one. Love is supposed to be is understood as the clear mind of God. It is the infinite source of consciousness. And it is substantial. Love is not something that is without substance. Love actually has substance. Love is a formative energy in the universe. It is, in fact, the source of direction, if you want to say, for the creation of suns and the creation of solar systems and the creation of all of the primary elements, the fundamental elements of the universe on the atomic periodic scale. And it's the source of light. In fact, light is a manifestation of love, and many sacred scriptures say that, in fact, that is the first manifestation of love, is the formation of light. Okay? Compassion is the practical expression of love. So, love without practical expression is just an idea. Love practically manifested in something tangible, something that can be weighed and measured, is an act of compassion, is the manifestation of compassion. When compassion manifests, there is a side effect. There's a side effect to the manifestation of love, and we call that side effect joy. Joy is the evidence or proof that love is actually being practically manifested. That's what joy is. So joy is actually very important in life. Love is very important in life. In fact, the traditional rishis would often have very strange medical diagnoses. Okay? So for example, you might come to them and you have this or that problem, and they would talk to you and look at you and maybe have you stick your tongue out, hear some story about your issues or about your life, and then they go, okay, I know what's wrong with you. Deficiency of love. Deficiency of love. So we need to fix that. We need to manifest love in your life in such a way that you can identify it. It can be an identifiable part of your life, this thing called love. And the clue, the technique to do that is that you begin to express yourself and have an element of compassionate expression in your life. In other words, being good to yourself and being good to those around you in practical ways. Being helpful, being empathetic, being sympathetic, and then finding ways to manifest that in something that actually materially changes your life. And then as you do that, love becomes not a concept. Love becomes actually something real. Okay? And then as that manifests, you start to have these little glimpses, these little windows, these little moments of experience where you are happy, where you are satisfied in your skin, where you are satisfied in your life, where you have a sense of joy in who you are, and that your life has meaning and purpose, and that the life of those around you has meaning and purpose. And the Thais have this saying, if we're not having fun, why are we doing it? This is something you should always ask yourself ultimately. If you're not having fun, why are you doing this? And if you're not having fun, then the therapy is you've got to find a way to practically express your love, and then the fun part, the joyful part, is the side effect of that. So if you have a deficiency of joy, that's another assessment, another diagnosis of disease. Not enough joy in life. Well, if I diagnosed you with that, then what I would do, I'll give you a real life. Let's don't talk hypothetical. Let's talk real life. I had a client who was a sad sack, a very sad person, a very depressed person, a very loveless person. And if you heard their life story, you would not blame them at all. You would not. You'd listen to a story and you go, wow, sucks to be you. Man, that's horrible. If I was you, I wouldn't like or care about anything. I wouldn't have hope. I'd have despair. I'd be sad. I wouldn't be able to say that I actually think there's really is something called love. I wouldn't believe it. And so when I had this client, I thought about it for a minute, and I thought about the Eightfold Path, and I said, okay, I have a solution. This person was a vice president for a company, for a corporate investment company. It's a woman. Very talented, very well educated, very powerful, very wealthy woman. And saddest person that I thought I had met until that time. And so I said, well, there is, in Chicago, there's this thing called the Chicago Food Bank. And what they do is restaurants and other companies donate food, and private people do, to this really humongous big warehouse. And then teams of volunteers organize the food, and they do like this Meals on Wheels thing for people that are elderly, shut-ins, disabled people, and then on holidays they do the big Thanksgiving dinners for all the homeless people, but you can actually go there every day. If you have no other way to get food, you can go to the food bank, you can get food, okay? And it's all volunteer. I think they've got like 2 or 3 paid people who administer the nonprofit, but everybody else there is pretty much volunteer. Well, I said, what I think you should do is find half a day, once a week, where you can go to the food bank and work as a volunteer. And don't work as management. Don't tell them that, you're a vice president of something or other and that, you want to help them with bookkeeping. I said, no. You go in there and you volunteer in the warehouse. And then if you're still there when something special is going on, put on an apron, go volunteer in the kitchen. Ladle that soup out. Hand people those trays that are hungry, that are coming through the line. And even if you just do half a day, 1 day per week, That is your prescription. That's what I prescribed to her, okay? Well, lo and behold, she was one of those rare clients that actually did what I asked her to do. Go figure. I don't know where that comes from, but every once in a while, I have somebody who's a client, I make a recommendation, they look, actually go out and do it pretty much like I told them to. It's a wonder to me. So, consider the source. So she actually started doing this, and she was a client for a while, and then we lost touch. You know, she really kind of completed her series with me, and I didn't talk to her for a while. Ran into her at a gallery opening about a year later and asked her what she was up to. And she was now the assistant director of the food bank. She was now the assistant director of the food bank. Okay, she looked about 1.5 inches taller. Her complexion was very different. She had no apparent signs of the disabling back pain that she'd had when she'd come to me as a client. And she said she told me the story, that she started out with a half a day, and then it turned into a whole day. And then it turned out that she would, anytime she had free time from work, that she would go over and start helping out at the food bank. And then she'd gone through a whole holiday season, and she said it happened one day that she was working the line when they were feeding a lot of homeless people, and people were coming in and they were really in destitute life, and they were really sad and maybe not so clean, and maybe they smelled funny and so on. And she had this one man who came in, and she gave him a simple tray of food that they were just making on the line, you know, and just, you know, handed it to him, and he just stopped there and kind of held up the line and was just staring at her. And when she realized that he hadn't moved, that he hadn't gone on, he was just standing in front of her, and he had these big tears just coming down his face. And he goes, "You saved my life today. You saved my life." That's what this means to me. And I want to say thank you. I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're here. I don't know why you, nice lady, would want to help somebody like me at all. It doesn't make any sense. You look like a really nice lady. I don't know why you're here, but I just want to tell you how grateful I am that you're here, that you're here to help me. It said something went inside, and all of a sudden she had this bliss, and she had this warmth, and she had this light around her, and this light around her shoulders, and this warmth in her belly. And she said for the first time in her life, she had this sense that other people had talked about, that she had read in books and even heard mention of in workshops, but where she had a moment where she knew for the first time in her life that she was exactly in the right place, doing exactly the right thing, and that she was being exactly the right person that she had always been meant to be her whole life. And for the first time in her life, right then, right that moment, in front of that guy, life was good. And she was happy. And she said that was it. And that became an emphasis, and eventually she becomes a director of the food bank. Okay. Well, that's a typical thing that we would see in any classic situation of traditional medicine, whether of whatever culture, Vedic culture, Chinese medicine, Native American culture, that there is a point to where to gain certain attributes or qualities of life that require that you be of service to someone else. They require that. In other words, the key to getting them is service. And if there's no service aspect in your life, concrete, definable service, practical expression of compassion, then you will not have those things. You can't get them any other way. You can't think them into existence. You can't wish them into existence, because they require action. What Dr. Amit Goswami calls do. They require you to do something, okay? Now, side effect of joy. Okay, so we got that far. Guess what? There's another side effect that only comes about when there's joy, and that's called equanimity. Equanimity is a fancy word. It means equal disposition. It means balanced mind. So what is mental illness? What is an imbalanced mind? What are some qualities of an imbalanced mind? Well, classically speaking, an imbalanced mind is any mind that doesn't have joy, compassion, and love in it. It doesn't matter. It's not about your intellect. It's not about how smart you are. It doesn't matter what your IQ is. If you have no love, you have no compassion, you have no joy, you are unbalanced. You are mentally unbalanced. You are sick. That's the way we define mental illness. Okay? And so the ancient rishis would say, you have to go through this process. You got to do all the steps. And then what will be a result of you doing these steps is you will have periods of clarity. You will have periods where your mind actually, the way it's advertised, you're actually doing some thinking and stuff's clicking and making sense and working in your life and so on. But what happens is we try to put understanding ahead of everything else. It's a Western attribute. We put understanding and intellectual competency above everything else. And we make everything that we might do that's really helpful contingent upon understanding. And according to the ancient rishis, we got it exactly wrong. Understanding is something that only a balanced mind can do. And in order to have a balanced mind, there must be other qualities in that space which create the basis of support for the mental activity to work in harmony with nature so we can know the true nature of the universe. And so Pramihvihan gives us this in traditional yogic terms, that these together are called the state of samadhi. Okay. Any questions on that Eightfold Path before we go to something a little different? All right, let's continue. We're going to move right through. On page 2, we have a chart. And on the chart, okay, you see that Thailand is in the middle. And you see China is up at the north, at the top in India. Okay. You see off to the side, there's Nepal and Burma. And off to the right, you see Indonesia and other areas. You see these lines showing how all these things are connected. China, Mongolia. See, Ayurveda is before India. Okay? And then follow these little lines and they all lead to us. USA world, that's us. And so if I take all the lineages of the living people who were my teachers and I map them out, it gives me essentially a genealogy of lineage for how these ideas come from us. And this is also your genealogy. And so USA World, you see Ajahn there, and that's you, and then you could start right there, and you could bring in your other teachers and your other traditions that are really helpful for you, that you work with, and so on, and from you, and so on, infinitely into the future. And that becomes your lineage tree also, okay? But all these influences come together in what we're trying to do. Now on page 3, we're going to do a little survey, and a little caveat here on page 3, which is the basic theory of SomaVeda traditional Thai medical massage is found in the following areas. And I wanted to give sort of an overview of some of the principal influences that are expressed in this course. And this is not complete. This is not complete. But it's enough to give you an overview. For example, Tibetan, Mongolian, Ayurvedic medical theory of chakras, chakra body types, and the correspondences. Panchakarma, oil, massage, oleation, and 23 assessments. Theory of Thai, Sipsen, which are the 10 energy lines. Theory of Prananadis, their locations and their indications. Theory of flow, which actually is originally Filipino. Theory of puja, prayers, white crew, acknowledgments, lineage, etc. generating bodhicitta, theory of Pramibhihan, theory of specific remedies for specific problems. This is when you ask me, how do I help this headache or this knee pain? That's a specific problem, and I'll give you a somewhat specific remedy. And we have traditional answers to the traditional questions. Of course, the challenge that we have right now, right here, is that we deal with imbalances that never existed in the history of the world before. So, for example, most obvious one, first one for me, of course, is examples of diseases which relate to toxicity and poisoning and exposure to hard radiation and radioactive isotopes. So pre-nuclear age and pre-advent of the nuclear bomb, okay, the atom bomb, roughly late 30s and 1940s, this radiation did not exist in the world anywhere, ever. So there is no traditional Chinese medicine cure for radiation poisoning. There is no classic Indian Ayurveda treatment or cure for radiation poisoning. There is no traditional Native American solution or cure for radiation poisoning. There's no such thing. Why? There was no such thing. So why would they be concerned with that? It's not listed as one of the 100 traditional remedies for the 100 traditional illnesses. See, up until relatively recent, and I mean no longer than, let's say, 200 years, no longer than 200 years, the day-to-day diseases and concerns of the mass of humanity were quite well known and were quite well established and were pretty much straightforward. And you could go to a school and you could learn the top 100 things that if you work on 10,000 clients, the chances are that they're going to have one of those 100 things is like 99%. 99%. And so you'd know the traditional remedies for those top 100 things. And that was part of what it meant to become a doctor, was to memorize not just the herbs and the points and the positions and the mantras, but was actually that you memorized the algorithms for the 100 treatments that that school represented. And that would be the school style. That would be the school style of medicine. Okay? We live in a really interesting time in that we deal with illnesses that never existed in the history of the world at all. We're the first generation in the history of the world to have xenoestrogen outgassing plastics. Never existed in the history of the world. Okay? We're the first generation in the history of the world to have to deal with antibiotic-resistant staph bacteria. Never existed before in the history of the world. Okay? We're the first culture in the history of the world to deal with air pollution. Air pollution. Didn't exist in the whole history of the world ever before. We have a whole list of things. And there's no traditional remedy for it. So when you study a system exclusively, let's say like Ayurveda or Chinese medicine or traditional Native American or other indigenous Native American medicine, you will not find solutions for those things. All those solutions are being developed right now. Right now. They're being invented. Right now. They're being perfected. And who's doing that? You are. We are. We're it. Tag. We're it. I believe that's why we are here now. That is our job. I believe that. I believe it with all my heart. That we are not accidentally incorporated into the most toxic period of the whole history of the planet and of the whole history of humanity, with an inclination to be able to learn and master healing, and then to be able to creatively craft new solutions for issues that have never existed before. I don't think it's an accident, or fate, or karma, or incarnation, or reiteration, or however it comes to be. We also have theory of laying on of hands for physical, psychical, and spiritual healing. I use the term paresthesia often. We have traditional Chinese medicine, and eventually we cover all the same basic understandings of Chinese medicine that you would learn in an acupuncture school. Western therapeutic hands-on, all these forms of massage, Esalen style, manual lymph drainage, craniosacral, neuromuscular therapy, table, portable chair massage, adjunct modalities, magnetic therapeutics, electro, far infrared, hot and cold contrast therapy. And these things also are relatively new. And we're doing modern variations of some old technologies, but far infrared lasers, for example, are new because there's no traditional Chinese medical treatment using a far infrared 8 nanosecond frequency handheld laser. There was no such thing. We had to have lasers to do that. Those are all 20th century inventions. And look on page 4, and we have a continuance of the list. Laying on of hands, bone setting, traditionally from Ayurveda and from traditional Thai yoga. All 8 branches and fundamental disciplines of yoga, including Hatha yoga and tantric yoga practices. Prayers, acupuncture and bloodletting, moxibustion and medicinal incense. In Native American way, we call that smudge. Medicinal incense. But in Ayurveda, jas, or incense like sandalwood, or other, nagchampa, incense, and so on. These are actually, have you ever read the box of Sai Baba Nagchampa? Do you notice that it's not directions for incense on the box? Have you ever read that? Did you ever have a thought that isn't it strange on the box of incense that the directions don't say anything about incense, that they're for how to use Nagchampa as medicine? Because that's what it is, okay? So it's the use of medicinal incense, burning of herbs and medicines. Herbal pharmacology, herbal and oil massage, Abhyanga or Panchakarma, therapeutic herbal steam and bath, and medicinal baths, Nuat Prakop Someone Pry, or steamed herbal compress, or herbal poultice treatments, hot and cold therapy, dietary or nutritional counseling, purging therapies, including enemas and so on. We talk about colonics and enemas and the Gerson method and the Jensen method of bowel cleansing and other systems like Hippocrates Institute. That's one of their core therapies is colonics. Where does that come from? Ayurveda. The idea of doing colonics, water injection into the rectum to stimulate, to cleanse, and then the idea of adding adjuncts and implants of other substances into the rectum, which then stimulate the portal vein, the hepatic portal vein, to stimulate the gallbladder and the liver to go into a cleanse and detox cycle to release toxins from the liver. As we know, the liver is actually the organ that cleans the blood. Okay, but what does that mean? It means it removes debris and toxins, protein residuals, the residual oxidized bodies of bacteria and fungus and virus and all this kind. But where does it go after that? It doesn't magically disappear. And the liver can accumulate this to a great degree. It can accumulate heavy metals, for example. So using the Ayurveda-based remedies of colonics and hydrotherapy, whether as a home or personal enema or as something organized by a therapist in a clinic, is traditionally part of this idea of healing the liver, bringing healing to the liver. And then if the liver, it remains happy as an organ and clean and functioning, then the blood is cleaner. And if the blood's cleaner, then all the cells are happier, and so on and so forth. Purging therapies, emergency techniques for trauma, unconsciousness, coma, etc. Triage originally comes from Ayurveda. The Charaka Samhita also includes the first triage recommendation for traumatic injuries and surgery and how to repair compound bone fractures, etc., etc. We practice the application of rituals in mental health. Midwifery practices. Traditionally in Thailand, babies were delivered by people who had undergone your training. the training that you're doing. This was a requirement for midwives. You have to learn this. You could not be a midwife and not be an expert in Nuwa, because the practices, especially like postpartum practices of facilitating the release of the placenta tissue and reduction and of the uterus, and also positioning of the uterus after birth and so on, all based on Nuwa. Okay, pre-delivery treatments for handling issues of the mother, including low back pain. And it's amazing the number of women who do delivery, which are forced into cesarean section. The primary reason, number one reason why women prefer cesarean section to natural childbirth is either the fear of or the actuality of low back pain. Horrible, debilitating, sharp, stabbing, low back pain. I don't know if I want the baby that much that I have to go through this. Well, you can virtually eliminate that with what we do. Virtually eliminate it. And of course, you start before the delivery. You start before. You start with the nutrition practice. You start with the self-exercise coaching. You start with the counseling. You start with the structural correction and the hands-on healing and the nuance. And then you carry that right into the delivery system. And you teach people how to work on each other, and you work on the mother, and you work on the daddy. Sometimes the biggest thing that you can do to facilitate a delivery, a peaceful, happy delivery, is leave the mother alone and just work on the dad. He's the impediment to the peace of the delivery. Or it might be an aunt, or it might be a cousin, or it might be mother, it might be grandfather, grandmother, whoever it is. Lay hands on them, fix them, get them in harmony with the process. And then the baby is delivered, healthy of course. And then you have a series of abdominal work, which you've already been introduced to, which has been traditional midwifery practice in Thailand for thousands of years. And what it does is it helps to evacuate the placenta in a nice way, and then you have a technique that you can use to help reposition and actually stimulate the hormonal changes, which will reduce the uterus as fast as possible, even reduce the amount of blood loss and other things like this, and any secondary issues with strain or back pain or what have you, handled, okay? And mom's back to her life within a few days. And so that means mothers were never meant to be out of the picture, because the delivery was so traumatic and so hard that now they have to take time off from the baby so they can recover to be in a mental, emotional, and physical state where they can actually do this bonding thing and this nurturing thing and this feeding thing with the babies. Okay, so if the mother's not in pocket, she's good to go. Later that day or the day after the delivery, back to herself within a week or so, the health of the baby is in a completely different crucible. It's in a completely different set of environmental factors, which we now know, of course, are causative for emotional and mental problems, potentially for the whole life of that child, of that person. So midwifery and incorporation of these teachings into midwifery is quite important. Balancing life practices, bring the elements in harmony. Death practices, learning how to deal with dying. Learning how to deal with dying. Ultimately, all medicine fails in the sense of ultimately we will all die. We're going to die from something. So since it's common to everyone, why are we not more aware of how to deal with it? You know, well, because we're in denial and repression, and we have a lot of kind of wacky ideas about death and dying and so on. But our tradition gives us some pretty concrete and clear ideas about how to facilitate death, how to become a dead person yourself. You know, how about that? Life practices and education and coaching for yourself on when you're in the place where you're going to be dying, so that you know what to do, what's expected, what are the things to focus on, what things to not focus on, What's going to be helpful? What's not going to be helpful? And then how to be peaceful and loving and compassionate and joyful around and with someone who's in transition. Before, during, and after. Now, I'm also part Scottish, and in my family tradition, we have this concept of the wake. Wake, maybe you guys have heard of that. Traditionally, in my clan, in my mother's clan, when someone died, you didn't cry. In fact, you weren't supposed to cry. And if you cried, people would say, stop crying. Why are you crying? Oh, because, they died. It's like, yeah, okay. A, they're not feeling any pain. They're not suffering, okay? B, the essence of them is still here. And they are now in transition. Their job at this point, their purpose in life is to move on. That's their purpose in life now. The dead person's purpose in life is to move on, not to hang around and take care of you. Why would you wish that for someone? For them to hang around and not move on to their higher purpose just because you want to be sad. Okay? And so what my family did, traditionally, what the clans did, was they organized a celebration. We didn't have a funeral. We had a celebration. Free at last. Free at last. On to the next. No more pain. No more limitation. No more criticism because you're you, and not somebody else ever again. And they'd have a big party. And now they do, something with the body too, also, right? They might have burn the body was quite common, okay? This practice, different cultures have mourning rituals, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, okay? But I think it is important to have a system, whatever it is. And if your religion and your faith gives you a system that works, that leaves people after death in better shape than it found them before death, see, that's my criteria. Does your death practices work? Is a strong criteria. And the test, the litmus test, is if your death practices work, is the community better off in some way after the decease than before? Are they continuing to be functional and continuing to escalate in their function? And if they are, then the death practices are working. Okay? And then we go to Native American. I'll skip over Krabi right now, which is a big part of my personal tradition, which is the Thai sword fighting tradition. I did write a book about that, The Tiger Sword of Thailand. At some point, if you want to order that book, you could do that and read more about the tiger sword. Native American ways, because we are Native American. We are in North America. We are a Native American church. And so we actually have 11 ceremonies that are traditional for Native Americans that we practice and teach, and we're going to do some before this class is over, for sure. And I personally have been introduced to Native American teachings in the Crow Way, the Lakota Way, the Dakota Way, Bear Medicine Tribe of the Ojibwe under Sun Bear, Cherokee, Waichol, Tarahumara, and other indigenous traditions of medicine, the Satchula tribes from South America and Ecuador, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and that's part of our tradition, and I try to pass those on to you. And of course, the last part of that page is because I believe we need to pay respect to our teachers. And I want to say this, I want to qualify this. If you do something that someone taught you, but you had a falling out with them for any reason, and you don't like them anymore, but you still do what they taught you, you must pay respect to them. They could be the worst person in the world, you now know. Some character flaw or some issue. whatever it is, we know what those kinds of issues are. But for some reason, you liked them at one time enough to be a student and learn something from them, and they gave you something which stuck, and you're still doing it to today. Don't practice that. You give them credit. Okay? It's not yours to judge them. It's not your right to judge them. If something was passed through them that's useful and helpful and practical, that enables you to be a more functional, a more loving, a more compassionate, a more effectively joyful, and a more effectively balanced person, and you use it, I don't care how much you hate them. You have to honor them. You have to pay respect. To them, at least at that time, they were the vehicle for the transmission of this knowledge. And in order for you to own that knowledge yourself, you have to give credit to where you got it. I didn't invent this. It's not my idea. It's the idea of giving credit where credit is due. Pratyahara. You have to honor where things come. It's called the spiritual copyright. Spiritual copyright. And you can fall out with them completely. You still have to honor them. They could turn out to be a stupid, crazy person. But if you're doing something they gave you, you can't cut them out and still own it. Because good, bad, or indifferent, it came to you that way. And somehow it came to them. And by honoring them, by giving them credit for that, now you can still think they're a horrible person. You never want to talk to them. You never want to really mention their name, and whatever. That's fine, okay? But when you pay respect to the teaching, when you pay respect to the energy and the essence of what you got, then you honor maybe the person who wasn't the bad person who gave it to them. You see? You don't cut them off. You don't cut the lineage off. What about the 100 people before them that gave it to them? And yes, they weren't the best vehicle. Maybe they cracked after a while. What you're honoring is the lineage, which came to you. Okay? And part of that give credit where credit is due idea is don't claim to have invented the whole world and everything in the world. Try to avoid that. That's an egocentric trap. This idea that it's all mine. I made it all up. Yes, I have my system. I call it SomaVeda. Yes, SomaVeda, Integrated Traditional Therapies and Thai Yoga, is federally trademarked. Okay? What's trademarked is the logo. What's trademarked is the name. What's trademarked is the creative way that I have taken some traditional things and put them together to work for my life and for my world and for my students. Okay, that's unique to me and unique to our school, okay? But we make no pretense that we don't own the origin of anything that we're doing. Nothing. That's why over and over again I give you the names of people. That's why over and over again I mention schools, and I tell you where it comes from and who it comes from and where those people lived. And you could go there if you wanted to. If you want to make up your own SomaVeda system and you want to live in 5 countries and travel and learn languages and do your own research and all that, you can do that. You can do that. And eventually you will create your own synthesis. Master something. Don't be a jack of all trades, master of nothing, which is kind of a popular thing right now. I call it the workshop mind. Everybody's going to workshops, everybody's doing, a little this, a little that, a little this and that, but nobody's actually really good at anything. Nobody's really mastering anything. Why? It takes too long. Who's got time? It would cut into my Facebook time to become a master of something. I'd actually have to get away from the TV or get away from the Facebook. Yeah, I recommend it.